What's up everyone, it's Vakosi. Fontaine's most fashionable president Navia is finally in the game in order to help you destroy your enemies with style. Being a character that most certainly has collected a large fanbase due to her amazing performance in the Archon quest, a lot of people, me included, have been looking forward to her release. So, if you want to have a giga-busted character, then I am here to help you out. In this guide we will go over her talents, her constellations, artifacts, weapons and finally team composition. As such, without further ado, let us take a closer look at the president of Spina di Rosula. First and foremost, Navia is a Geo DPS character that focuses on using crystalline reactions in order to do heavy single target nukes. She can be played not just as an on-field DPS character, but also in a quick swap composition. Her main talent, the one that does most of the damage basically, is Ceremonial Crystal Shot, her elemental skill. In a basic nutshell it works as follows. Whenever you collect an elemental shard, which you create by triggering crystalline reactions, you gain 1 stack of crystal shrapnel. You can have up to 6 stacks and each stack will increase the damage you do with your elemental skill. The elemental skill itself penetrates your opponents and you can use that to your advantage in order to hit multiple enemies at once, and on top of that you can even enter a hold aiming mode where you are able to absorb nearby elemental shards. Now, how does the damage of elemental skill scale with the stacks? Well, the TLDR answer to that is to use it either whenever you have 3 stacks or 6 stacks. You can see the number of stacks you have right next to Navia, and this is what it looks like if you have 1, 2 or 3 stacks, and this is for 4, 5 or 6 stacks. Once again, use it at either 3 or 6 stacks. Getting to 6 stacks is not difficult at all, so if you want to min-max her, then go for it. And that is basically her elemental skill. It is the core element of her gameplay rotation. Everything else, including her elemental burst, which we will get to in a moment, is just there in order to make her elemental skill easier to use. Not to mention that it has 2 charges, so it's a really good elemental skill. Her elemental burst is an area of effect attack that will do damage over time even when Navia is not on the field. But the special thing here is that every 2.4 seconds you get 1 stack of crystal shrapnel for your elemental skill. On top of that, her elemental burst damage is considered as Geo, which means you can easily trigger crystalline reactions by using your other characters. In a basic nutshell, this means that her elemental burst is there in order to make your elemental skill easier to use. And the same kinda applies to her passives. Undisclosed Distribution Channels, and that is quite a long name, turns your normal and charge attacks into Geo attacks for 4 seconds after using your elemental skill. It also increases the damage you do with them, but the important thing here is that you now have more options when it comes to triggering crystalline reactions. And lastly, Mutual Assistance Network increases your attack by up to 40% if you have 2 other elements in your party. Though, keep in mind, for that one to work, you can only use Pyro, Electro, Hydro or Cryo characters. And that is her entire gameplay loop. Use your elemental burst, your other characters, your normal and charge attacks in order to support your elemental shard production, and once you have 6 shards, you can use your elemental skill in order to absolutely destroy your opponents. Now let us take a closer look at something that might not be interesting to most people out there, but some of you might decide to go for a Constellation 6 Navia. If you're not interested in this, then you can easily skip this part and continue with the artifacts. Constellation 1 restores energy and reduces the cooldown of your elemental burst depending on the crystalline shrapnel stacks you consume during your elemental skill. In order to get the full benefits of this constellation, you need to consume at least 3 stacks. Constellation 2 increases your crit rate by up to 36%, depending on the amount of stacks you consume, and on top of that, each time you use your elemental skill, Navia will also trigger 1 instance of her elemental burst damage. Constellation 3 and 5 do the same as they always do, and Constellation 4 will reduce the Geo resistance of your opponents by 20% when they are hit by her elemental burst. Remember Constellation 2? Well, that single damage instance of her elemental burst will also trigger this effect. And finally, Constellation 6. This one is busted and makes her a lot easier to play. First of all, it increases your crit damage by up to 135%, but unlike her other constellations, this one counts the stacks you have once you go beyond 3 stack instances. So stack number 4, 5 and 6 will increase your damage, and most importantly, you get those stacks back. So once you have Constellation 6, you will always start with 3 stacks as long as you use your fully upgraded elemental skill. Speaking about upgrades, in what order do we level her talents? The obvious answer here is elemental skill all the way to 10, it is busted, and after that we use her elemental burst, level 9 or 10 depending on how far you want to go, and lastly her normal attack. Level 6 is completely fine for this one as you are only using it for shard generation. You can even leave it at level 1 if you want to, but you know, if you're min-maxing then you should at least go for level 6, maybe even higher. With all of her talents and constellations done, let us now take a closer look at her artifacts. First of all, welcome back to everyone who decided to skip her constellations, and I hope you didn't have to wait too long. Which you didn't, because this is a video you can skip, which, you know, I should stop talking. Either way, there are a lot of options right now when it comes to suitable artifacts. I'm not going to do a big breakdown when it comes to numbers and all of that stuff, because that is frankly speaking too much for this guide. Instead, we are going to take a look at some of the sets that I'm using and what stats you should be going for. For her sands, we want to use attack, geo damage on her goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on her circlet. Substats are very simple. Navia follows the same principle as any other standard DPS character. Attack, crit rate and crit damage, as well as energy recharge. How much energy recharge? Well, her elemental burst is not too expensive, so you don't need to go for 200% or more. 140% to 180% is enough for Navia, depending on your team composition. When it comes to sets, I firstly want to mention the new Best in Slot Geo set. It just got released in patch 4.3 and you can find it up here. It gives you attack, geo damage and even more if you have a shield active. Obviously this one is new, so you kinda need to farm it. As a tip, if you're still leveling her talents, then go ahead and farm the materials for that first before you invest your resin into this domain. With the talents you don't really need to gamble, so it is a certain damage increase compared to artifacts. But once you're done with the talents, you can go ahead and try your luck in the new domain. But obviously there are a few other options you can use. The Marushuse Hunter set as well as the Golden Trope set are both good on Navia, especially if you're playing her with Furina. The Marushuse Hunter set will give you crit rate whenever you lose or gain HP, which happens naturally if you're using Furina in your team. And the Golden Trope set will increase your skill damage by up to 45%. If you don't have any of these and you need to rely on the more old school artifact sets, then you are still perfectly fine. But in that case, I would advise you to use a two-piece combination. You can use a Gladiator set, the Shimenava set, Archaic Petra, basically anything that increases your attack or geo damage. As you can see, there are a lot of options, and if you're unsure about what artifacts to use, or if you want to min-max her, then go ahead and use an optimizer. I do too, and believe me, it helps. I will leave a link to the one I'm using down in the description box below. Now let us talk about weapons. For her 5-star options, you can go for her signature weapon, which frankly speaking is her best in slot weapon as it gives her everything she wants to have. Crit rate, attack, more damage on top of that, it kinda has it all. Other 5-star options are the Beacon of the Reed Sea, which I'm using because I'm a Dia simp, and Wethorn Stone Thrasher. Both of them are really good options, so if you have them, go for them. When it comes to 4-star options, there are a few good free-to-play weapons available in the game. First we have the new 4.3 event weapon, the Ultimate Overlord Mega Magic Sword. It gives you attack, energy recharge and a rather interesting passive effect. After that we have Tidal Shadow. You can craft this one and you can even upgrade it all the way to Refinement 5 if you have the billets. And lastly we have the Serpent Spine. It is a kinda pay-to-win weapon, but it's not too expensive. It comes from the Battle Pass and it is really good. In another video I mentioned that it was my first fully leveled Claymore weapon and I will stay true to that. It is a really good option, so if you have it, use it. If you don't have any of these weapons, then work your way towards the new event weapon, which I assume begins in just a few days. Besides that, let us now move on to the last section of our guide, team composition. When it comes to team composition, the most important thing to keep in mind is that you need to trigger crystallize reactions in order to collect elemental shards. That means you are limited to Pyro, Hydro, Cryo or Electro characters. Dendro does not work because it cannot trigger crystallize, and the same applies to Anemo. Not to mention that you can't absorb geo damage with characters like Kazo or Sucrose, so you can't really use them in order to enhance your damage. As such, the most common compositions you're going to see are either teams including 2 Geo characters for the crystallize reaction, with whatever other support characters you're going to use, or a Navia solo composition where she is the only Geo character. Examples for that are a double Geo and Pyro team. Bennett and Jungling are good characters when it comes to triggering reactions, and you can throw in a second Geo character like Albedo or Zhongli in order to make it even easier. Other options that follow the 2+2 principle are Navia and Zhongli with Furina and Yelan, or Navia and Albedo with Yaemiko and Kuki Shinobu. Obviously for the 5-star characters you can use their smaller 4-star versions if you don't have them, so Yelan and Xingqiu or Yaemiko and Fischl. Keep in mind that for all these different compositions, your main focus is lying on generating elemental shards, but triggering crystalline reactions has a 1-second cooldown per enemy, so try to keep that in mind. If you want to use her as a solo Geo character, then you're still going for a similar composition. In its most basic way, you are going for a 1+1+2 composition because you still want to have the elemental resonance. The Geo and Pyro resonances are very good when it comes to this. Examples you can use are Navia with Yelan Bennett. With Yelan, Bennett and Jungling, Yelan will give you a not much needed but most certainly welcome damage increase due to her elemental burst, while Jungling and Bennett will give you a boost when it comes to shard generation. Obviously, instead of Yelan, you can also use Furina or any other character in the game that will help you by increasing your damage. As always, this kinda depends on what characters you have, but I think I made the basic principle of Navia's team composition very easy to understand. Shard generation as well as damage support, that is kinda what you're trying to go for here. Now, before we get to my own review when it comes to Navia, I thought it would be a good idea to include a showcase to show you guys what she is able to do. And we're gonna do that on floor 12, chamber 2, the big terrace room, right? We're gonna fight that thing, and her current level is level 80 with 465 talent, so nowhere close to being maxed, right? But don't worry, my plan is to max her out later on. But for now, that's where she is at, and let me spoil you, she will be easily able to clear the entire thing. So yeah, I hope this will help you when it comes to deciding whether you want to pull her or not. And with that, we are at the end of the guide. So let me give you my own opinion when it comes to Navia. First of all, just like with any other Fontanian character, the damage she does is absolutely insane. I did this entire guide on the live server because I don't have beta server access, and I did a few test runs in the Spiral Abyss on floor 12. I got 27 stars with a level 84/65 Navia. That is insane, and it might even put the scaling of the new characters into question. But I enjoyed her nonetheless. Secondly, Navia is a character that hard carried the Archon Crescent Fontaine. She might not have done that by herself, but every scene she was in was really good. Not to mention that her overall appearance as a character is quite beautiful. She's a really well designed character. And lastly, so far I haven't really used Geo characters, even though I am a fossil when it comes to Genshin. I don't have Zhongli, I don't have Ito, I might have Albedo, but he's not really a DPS character. As such, Navia is my first real Geo DPS character, and that is quite refreshing. It brings a new playstyle to the game, and I like it a lot. So overall, a really good character. Maybe not a 10 out of 10 Furina character, but definitely up there. If you think the same, let me know in the comments. As usual, this guide was a lot of work. I do all the speaking and editing alone, and I don't have beta server access, so I basically create these guides whenever a character releases. As such, if it was helpful, then leave a like, a comment, maybe a sub. Other than that, have a great day or night wherever you live, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.